Welcome to another episode of real-life haunted stories. If you love chilling tales and spine-tingling horror stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a scare. New nightmares drop every week. Stay haunted. So, let's start our today's episode. Today, I am sharing 10 real-life horror stories with you. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback keeps us motivated and helps us to grow. Thank you. Story 1. The Vanishing Hotel Room. Paris, 1889. Margaret and her mother arrived in Paris for the Exposition Universelle, checking into the luxurious Hôtel de l'Europe. After a long journey, her mother began feeling ill. The concierge offered to send for a doctor, while Margaret was sent to retrieve medicine from a distant pharmacy. The errand took longer than expected, and when Margaret returned, her mother was nowhere to be found. Worse, the hotel staff claimed to have no record of their arrival. The room they had stayed in was now pristine, showing no sign of occupancy. Frantic, Margaret demanded to search, but the staff remained firm. She had arrived alone. Desperate, she ran to the British Embassy for help. Officials investigated, but found no proof her mother had ever been there. With no support, Margaret was forced to leave Paris, forever haunted by the mystery. Years later, an old concierge confessed Margaret's mother had succumbed to a deadly illness. The hotel, fearing reputational damage during the exposition, had disposed of her body and erased all traces of her existence. Story 2. The Phone Stalker, Ohio, 2007. A family in Ohio began receiving strange phone calls from an unknown number. At first, it was static, then a whispering voice repeating their names. Calls came at all hours, even when the phones were turned off. One evening, while watching TV, their daughter screamed. The caller had sent a photo taken from inside the house. Panic set in. The police were called, but the number was untraceable. Then, the voice became violent. It knew where they had gone that day, what they were wearing. It whispered threats, detailing their daily routines. At one point, the father awoke to find his phone recording him in his sleep. When the police conducted a deeper investigation, they discovered something chilling. The calls were coming from inside their own phones. The stalker had hacked into the family's devices using a method known as phone cloning, allowing them to monitor conversations, access cameras, and even control the phones remotely. To this day, the family has no idea who was behind it. Story 3. The Man in the Attic. Los Angeles, 1986. Jennifer, a college student, moved into a small apartment near campus. Soon after, she noticed things going missing. Small items, food from the fridge. She assumed she was being forgetful until she found her cat staring intently at the ceiling. One night, she heard faint shuffling overhead. Thinking it was a raccoon, she called her landlord, who dismissed her concerns. The noises continued, growing bolder, whispers in the dark. Objects moved overnight. Finally, unable to take it anymore, she called the police. When they searched the attic, they found a small, makeshift living space, a mattress, empty food wrappers, and a notebook filled with disturbing messages about Jennifer. Notes about her daily routine, descriptions of her sleeping, even locks of her hair. The intruder, a homeless man who had been living in the attic for months, was caught trying to sneak back in that night. The thought that he had watched her every move unseen haunted her long after she moved out. Story 4. The Disappearing Children of McKay Road, Ontario, 1950s, present. McKay Road, a quiet stretch outside Barrie, Ontario, carries a sinister reputation. Since the 1950s, children have gone missing near the road without explanation. One infamous case involved two siblings, Jacob and Sarah, who were last seen playing near the tree line. Their mother, only steps away, heard laughter one moment, then silence the next. They had vanished without a sound. A massive search turned up no clues until days later, when Sarah's shoes were found deep in the woods, tied together in a tree. No other trace was found. Locals whisper that a strange figure has been spotted along McKay Road at night, a tall, shadowy entity that moves unnaturally fast. Some say it's the spirit of a man who died in a car accident decades ago, forever haunting the area, luring children into the forest. The disappearances continue, with no explanations ever found. Story 5. The Old Woman in the Mirror, England, 1973. Emily, a teenager, received an antique mirror as a gift from her grandmother. It was beautiful, but gave her an uneasy feeling. At night, she started seeing movement in its reflection, a shadow where there should be none. One night, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, she covered the mirror with a blanket. The next morning, the blanket was on the floor, and the glass was smeared with fingerprints on the inside. Her mother dismissed her fears until she, too, started seeing strange things. The old woman's reflection appearing in glimpses standing behind them, even though she wasn't in the room. Emily's grandmother finally revealed the truth. The mirror had once belonged to a woman accused of witchcraft centuries ago. Legend said she had cursed it with her final breath, trapping her soul inside. Determined to be rid of it, Emily's family tried to break the mirror, but no matter how hard they hit it, the glass refused to shatter. Finally, they buried it deep in the woods. Years later, when visiting the site, Emily found the mirror, clean, intact, and resting on the ground, as if waiting for her. Story 6. The Smiling Man, Seattle, 2013. A young man walking home late one night noticed someone across the street. A tall, thin man dressed in an old suit. The man's head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and he had an unnervingly wide grin on his face. At first, the figure stood motionless, then suddenly began skipping toward him in exaggerated movements, still smiling. The young man quickened his pace, but the smiling man matched it, darting across the street in an erratic dance. Then, without warning, the smiling man stopped, dropping his grin, his face blank. He turned his head upward, staring at the sky, as if looking at something invisible. Then, in a blink, he bolted toward the young man at full speed. Terrified, the young man sprinted until he reached his apartment, locking the door behind him. He peeked through the peephole. Nothing. But that night, from his window, he saw the smiling man standing on the sidewalk, facing his building, unmoving. He never saw him again, but others in the city have reported similar encounters since. Story 7. The Shadow in the Baby Monitor, Texas, 2004. When Lisa and her husband bought a baby monitor with a video feature, they felt relieved, thinking they could check on their infant son without disturbing him. But soon, Lisa started seeing something unsettling. Shadows moving in the nursery when no one was there. At first, she thought it was interference. Then, one night, she woke to a chilling sight. a figure standing over the crib. She ran to the room, but no one was inside. Her husband dismissed it as paranoia until he too saw something on the monitor, a dark silhouette, too tall to be a child, standing by the crib. They checked the room, but again, it was empty. Desperate, they set up another camera without telling anyone. What they caught made them leave the house forever. At 3:14 a.m., the monitor showed the crib empty, but on the hidden camera, a black figure with hollow eyes could be seen leaning over the baby, its hands just inches from his face before it faded away. The family moved out the next day. Story 8. The Elevator Ritual. South Korea, 2010. A university student named Ji-won read about an urban legend online, a ritual that could take someone to another dimension using an elevator. Out of curiosity, she decided to try it in her dorm building late at night. Following the steps precisely, pressing the floors in a specific order, she reached the 10th floor, where the legend said a woman might enter. Sure enough, when the doors opened, a tall, pale woman in a red dress stepped in. Ji-won avoided eye contact as the instructions warned. The woman didn't speak, but something felt wrong. The doors closed, and suddenly the lights flickered. The elevator moved downward, but when it stopped, the doors opened to complete darkness. No lobby, no people, just an endless, dimly lit void. Panicking, Ji-won frantically pressed buttons, but nothing worked. Then, the woman spoke in a voice that sounded layered, like multiple people speaking at once. "You shouldn't have come here." Ji-won squeezed her eyes shut, following the final step, ignoring the woman until the elevator took her back. When she opened them, she was in the lobby, shaking. She ran out of the building, never using that elevator again. But from then on, whenever she passed it, she swore she could hear a woman whispering her name. Story 9. The Man in the Crawl Space. North Carolina, 2019. Maddie, a college student, had been hearing strange noises in her rented house, scratching, faint rustling, but assumed it was mice. When things started going missing, she blamed her roommate. Then, one night, while alone, she heard something worse. Heavy breathing coming from inside the vents. Terrified, she called her landlord, who dismissed it as a ventilation issue. But when she heard the sound again, she decided to check for herself. Grabbing a flashlight, she removed the vent cover in her closet. The light revealed a horrifying sight. 2 eyes, wide and bloodshot, staring back at her. Screaming, she ran out and called 911. When police arrived, they discovered a homeless man living in the crawl space, surviving off stolen food. He had been there for months, watching her through vents and hidden spaces. Maddie moved out immediately, but the thought of being watched for so long without realizing it haunted her for years. Story 10. The Smell of Death. Japan, 1997. In a small Tokyo apartment complex, residents began complaining about a foul smell. The building's owner dismissed it as plumbing issues, but the scent grew unbearable. One tenant, a woman named Yuki, noticed something even stranger. Her neighbor, an elderly man who lived alone, hadn't been seen for weeks. Finally, authorities were called. When they forced the door open, they were met with a grotesque sight. The old man's body, still sitting in his chair, had decayed beyond recognition. But the horror didn't stop there. As they examined the apartment, they found hundreds of notebooks stacked against the walls. Each one contained the same sentence, written repeatedly. He is coming for me. The final pages were scrawled with frantic, illegible handwriting. And at the very bottom of the last page, in a different pen, was a single sentence. I told you. The police never determined who the old man had been writing about, or if someone had actually been watching him. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, to show your support, comment to share your thoughts or ask questions, and don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.